The wedding was beautiful, overly so, the kind of overdone beauty that meant to distract from all the ugliness hiding just beneath the surface. Flowers draped every banister, their colors too bright to be natural. The music was loud enough to cover whispers. And Sansa Stark, Lady of Winterfell, prisoner of the crown, widow of her murdered father and brother, stood in a gown picked by Cersei herself, sewn with Lannister red. She looked like part of the celebration, but inside her, chest. Her heart was cold and hard, frozen in the north where her family's blood still stained the snow. Joffrey Baratheon, bastard son of incest and rightful target of every curse the gods had to offer, sat smugly on his golden chair, sipping wine and cutting his meat like a child pretending to be a man. Sansa watched him closely, forcing her face into practiced stillness. She'd gotten good at that, hiding her fear, her hatred. She knew better now than to cry or tremble. Those things fed him. She wasn't giving him anything today. Not tears, not smiles, and not mercy. It had taken months to plan. Quietly. Carefully. Varys had whispered once that even birds could be burned by wildfire if they flew too close to the wrong ear. So she kept her silence. But she watched. She remembered everything. The way servants came and went from the kitchens, which guards took which posts, and when they were changed, who poured the wine, who fetched the fruit. She'd learned something else, too, watching Margaery Tyrell and her grandmother Olenna walk through court like roses hiding thorns. The Tyrells wanted Joffrey dead, too. She could see it in Olenna's eyes whenever the boy king spat another insult. But they wanted it done clean, quiet, like pruning a garden. Sansa wanted it loud. She didn't care if it made a mess. They'd killed her father in front of a crowd. Her brother's head had been sewn onto the body of his direwolf and paraded through a hall. Why should Joffrey get to die gently? So she had found her own way. A contact in the kitchens, paid through stolen coins and the whispered promise of a better life. A pouch of fine northern powder, tasteless, colorless, deadly in minutes. The plan was simple. One of the pies. Not his wine. That would be too obvious. Too common. Everyone expected poison in the cup. No, hers would come with something he loved even more than drink. Meat. She had stood quietly while the pie was brought forward, large and steaming. Joffrey rose from his seat, waving. For silence like a god blessing mortals. "The king's pie!" he announced, proud as ever, face already red with wine and self-satisfaction. The guests clapped politely. Margaery smiled, tight-lipped and distant. Olenna watched with a face like carved stone. Cersei was drunk as usual, her eyes glassy. Joffrey took a bite, laughed, took another. "Delicious," he declared. "Fit for a king, or perhaps for a dog." Then he locked eyes with her and sneered. "I wonder, Lady Stark, would you like a bite? Or do you fear it might not be northern enough for your tastes?" The crowd chuckled, low and cruel. Sansa stepped forward. Every heartbeat thudded in, her ears like a drum of war. She smiled. "I wouldn't want to rob you of your meal, Your Grace." She curtsied, turned, and walked back to her seat. He took another bite, a large one. Within moments, his laughter turned into coughing, then gasping. The room fell silent as he grabbed at his throat, his face turning red, then purple. His mouth foamed slightly at the corners. People began to rise. Panic rippled across the room. Sansa sat still. She did not smile, but she did not look away either. As Joffrey Baratheon collapsed to the ground, clawing at his neck, spitting blood into his mother's lap, Sansa Stark watched. Calm. Cold. Certain. He died inches away from her feet, and the moment he stopped twitching, Sansa stood and ran. But not to flee in fear. She had other things to do. The screams began as whispers, confusion turning to chaos in a matter of seconds. Queen Cersei wailed like a dying animal, cradling her son's lifeless body in her arms, shrieking for the Maester, for the guards, for vengeance. But it was too late. Joffrey's purple lips and frozen eyes told the truth. He was gone. Dead. In front of half the kingdom. The perfect wedding gift. Sansa didn't wait to see who cried harder. She moved through the panicking crowd with quiet purpose, her movements deliberate, her eyes locked on the exit she had mapped over and over in her mind. Her steps were calm, practiced. In her mind, she heard her mother's voice. Don't run. Don't look afraid. Fear draws blades like blood draws wolves. The moment she passed the last column of the Great Hall, she broke into a sprint. Sir Dantos Hollard was waiting, just as promised, hidden in the shadows behind the Godswood wall, drunk as usual, but for once, alert. "Quick now, milady," he hissed, helping her over a mossy stone and through the narrow garden path. "The boat's ready, just like I said, just like he said." She didn't ask who he was. She didn't care. Whether it was Littlefinger, Varys, or even the stranger himself, it didn't matter. She had played her part. Joffrey was dead. Nothing else in the world mattered more in that moment. They rushed through the back corridors of the Red Keep, lit, only by moonlight slipping through the arrow slits. Sansa's breath came fast but steady. She didn't cry. Not like before. There was no time for that. But behind them, bells rang. Not wedding bells. Alarm bells. "The king is dead!" someone shouted from atop the ramparts. "Seal the gates!" Dantos panicked, grabbing her arm harder than she liked. "Too late! They'll lock the dock soon. We've got to go now, girl." He pulled her down an old stairwell that led to the servants' tunnels. They smelled of rot and rats, and the air was thick with mildew, but she didn't flinch. If she had to crawl through mud and bone to get out of King's Landing, she would. She had crawled through worse already. She had survived worse. They reached the underground cove where a small boat rocked in the tide, cloaked by the night. A shadowy figure waited by the oars, dressed in black. Sansa froze for a second, not because she recognized him, but because he didn't flinch at the sight of her. He had been expecting her, like this was all part of a much older plan. "Pater." Baelish gave her a slight smile. "You've done well, my sweet girl," he said, helping her into the boat. Sansa didn't answer. She only sat, hands clenched in her lap, watching the Red Keep grow smaller in the distance as the boat silently cut through the water. The city that had swallowed her whole was behind her now. And yet, as the moonlight shone on the dark waves, something twisted in her chest. She had killed a king. Not just watched, not just hoped. Done. And yet, no justice had been served. Not really. Her father was still dead. Her mother and brother, gone. Her home still burned. And Joffrey's death, as satisfying as it had been, was just one crack in the wall. "You'll be safe soon," Pater whispered beside her, eyes gleaming with satisfaction. "And powerful. You'll have a role to play in the coming game, my lady. Much more than a pawn this time." Sansa turned her head slowly toward him. "I don't want to play your game." He chuckled. "But you already are." She looked down at her hands, pale and shaking slightly. There was no blood on them. And yet, they had delivered death. She didn't regret it. But something inside her had changed, something cold and permanent. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about control. She had killed the boy king, and the realm would tremble from it. Chaos would follow, suspicions would rise, and eventually, questions would come her way. Let them. Let the lions rage. Let the wolves howl. Let the flowers of Highgarden whisper behind their fans. Sansa Stark had taken her first piece, off the board, and she was just getting started. The next morning, the city awoke in terror. The sun had barely risen, but already black banners hung over the Red Keep. Ravens flew in every direction, spreading the news like wildfire. King Joffrey Baratheon was dead, poisoned. The nobles whispered. The commoners rioted, and the Sept of Baelor stood silent, its bells tolling a song of death no one really mourned. Sansa Stark was gone. Cersei screamed her name in the throne room like a curse, flinging goblets and plates, her eyes swollen with rage and wine. "She did this! That little wolf bitch! I want her found! I want her torn apart!" she howled, slapping a guard across. The face when he dared suggest the trail had gone cold, but not everyone mourned. In the shadows of the small council chamber, Tywin Lannister sat with his fingers steepled under his chin. He had known his grandson was a problem. He had feared Joffrey's stupidity would cost them everything. Still, this death, so public, so uncontrolled, was dangerous, unpredictable. It reeked of conspiracy, not of strategy. And when they found Ser Dontos's bloated body floating near the mudgate hours later, throat slit and pockets emptied, the scent of something deeper began to rise. Someone had helped Sansa. That much was clear. But who? And why now? Far across the narrow sea, aboard a ship headed to the Fingers, Sansa sat below deck in silence. The boat rocked gently, the air stale with salt and wood rot. But she didn't mind. It was quiet. She hadn't felt quiet in so long. Petter Baelish watched her from the corner, reading her more than the sea charts he pretended to study. "You're not afraid," he said finally, breaking the silence. Sansa looked up. Her eyes were hollow. Not sad, hollow. "I was afraid for too long," she said. "It didn't protect me." Littlefinger smiled. "Good. Fear is a leash. You've taken yours off. Now you can begin." "Begin what?" He leaned forward slightly. "Becoming what they never wanted you to be." "A player?" she asked, voice cold. He tilted his head. "A queen." Sansa scoffed quietly. "There's no throne waiting for me." "No," he agreed. "Not yet." There was a pause. She looked out the porthole, where waves crashed like whispers against the wood. Her thoughts drifted, north, always north, to Winterfell, to her mother's warm hands, to Robb's laughter, to Arya's scowls, all gone, burned or butchered. Stolen from her, and now, one life taken back. But still not enough. "They'll come for me," she said softly. "They'll try," Peter answered. "But you're not that girl anymore, Sansa. You're not the little bird. You've drawn blood now." And she had. But guilt was a strange thing. It didn't arrive like people expected. It wasn't thunder and grief. It was silence, a numbness. The question that echoed after the act, what now? That night she dreamed of the feast. But in the dream, Joffrey didn't die from the poison. He stood from the table, staggered, then turned to her with red eyes and a grin full of teeth. "You thought you'd won," he whispered, voice wet and broken. "But you can't kill a monster. You are one." She woke up sweating, heart hammering in the darkness, and for the first time, she whispered the truth to herself. "I'm not a lady anymore." Peter's voice came from the shadows. He had been awake, watching. "No," he said. "You're something far more dangerous." They reached the coast 3 days later. A castle nestled in cliffs greeted them with gray skies and colder winds. The Eyrie would be their next step. Lady Lysa awaited them, unknowing, eager. But Sansa, she no longer walked blindly into anything. She had killed a king. She could kill again. And this time, she would choose her targets more carefully. The path to the Eyrie was narrow and winding, clinging to the sides of cliffs like a serpent, high above the rocky valleys of the Vale. Sansa had changed out of her wedding gown days. Ago. But the ghost of it still clung to her. She could feel its weight, tight around the neck, bleeding red and gold, the colors of her cage. Now she wore plain wool, a cloak of gray that covered her hair, her face, her past. Pater had insisted she travel as Elaine Stone, his supposed bastard daughter. She didn't argue. Names were masks now. Sansa Stark was both too powerful and too hunted. And besides, she wasn't sure she wanted to be Sansa anymore. That girl had cried herself to sleep in a tower. This one had watched a king die, gasping at her feet. The guards at the bloody gate recognized Pater immediately. "Lord Baelish," one said with a respectful nod, "Lady Lysa's been expecting you." Expecting him, not them. That was fine. It gave Sansa the element of surprise. By the time they reached the high halls of the Eyrie, the sky had darkened, a heavy snow swirling outside the moon-shaped windows. Lady Lysa stood waiting at the top of the steps, arms spread wide, smile too wide. Sansa saw instantly. This woman was unstable. Her eyes darted, her laugh was sharp and forced, and when she hugged Pater, it was with desperation, not love. Sansa watched quietly, memorizing every twitch, every weakness. Lysa had power here, but no control. Not really. "And this must be your daughter," Lysa said, stretching the word with fake warmth. Her eyes flicked over Sansa. Jealousy, possessiveness. It wasn't even well hidden. Sansa smiled softly. "Elaine, my lady, I'm honored to meet you." Lysa sniffed, then took her hand. "Such pretty manners," she said tightly. "Almost too pretty." Pater stepped in quickly, diffusing the moment. "She'll be safe here, Lysa. No eyes from the capital. The storm has passed." But Sansa knew better. Storms didn't pass. They simply circled back, stronger. Days passed in that high, hollow castle. Snow fell constantly, time slowed, and still the whispers came. From guards, from maids, from behind doors she wasn't supposed to be near. "The girl came with Lord Baelish. She's too quiet. She doesn't act like a servant's child." Sansa let them talk. She needed them to. Let them build rumors. Let them build myths. Fear followed. Mystery. And mystery gave her cover. One evening she stood at the edge of the moon door, the great open hole that looked down into endless sky. Lysa had brought her there, seemingly by impulse. "This is where we settle things here in the Eyrie," she said, her voice fluttering like a bird. "Where truth finds wings. My sister, your mother, never appreciated the justice of the Vale." Sansa didn't flinch. My mother was a just woman. Lysa's smile cracked. "Yes, well? She never had Pater's love, did she? Not truly, not like I do." Sansa said nothing. Let her unravel. Let her show her hand. "I see how he looks." "At you," Lysa snapped suddenly. "With those clever little wolf eyes. You think you can fool me?" Sansa tilted her head. "I don't want him." Lysa's laugh echoed across the stone. "But he wants you. I know it. I see it." For the first time, Sansa met her gaze and let the truth slip through, just enough to strike. "If you're so sure of his heart, you wouldn't be so afraid of mine." Lysa stared at her, trembling, then turned and walked away without a word. Pater came to her chamber that night. He didn't knock. He never did. "She's unraveling," he said, almost like he admired it. "She'll pull you down with her?" Sansa replied quietly, brushing her hair in the mirror. Pater stepped closer. "Not if I have something better to hold on to." She looked up. Their eyes met in the reflection. And for a moment, she saw what he truly wanted. It wasn't love, it was possession. Not of her body, but of her story. Her name, her power. And he thought he was the author. But Sansa had written her own ending once already. You should be careful, she said softly. Lysa might get ideas. Pater smiled thinly. Let her. The next morning, Lady Lysa summoned her again. This time, there was no smile, just the cold, hungry wind waiting beyond the moon door. The wind howled like a starving wolf through the open moon door, swirling Lysa's skirts around her legs and tugging at the blue silk drapes behind her. The floor was icy stone, and the chamber felt like a mouth ready to swallow whoever stepped too close. Sansa stood several feet back from the edge, her cloak wrapped tightly around her, but her eyes locked on Lysa with quiet steadiness. She didn't flinch when Lysa stepped closer to the void. You think I won't do it? Lysa hissed. You think I haven't done worse? Sansa didn't answer. She just watched. You're not my blood, Lysa continued, voice cracking. You're a Stark, a cursed, ruinous name. You bring death wherever you go, your father, your mother, your brother. And now my son's begun asking about you. She took another step forward, hair whipping across her face. I see how they all look at you with your sad eyes and your false modesty. You think it makes you a lady? She sneered. It makes you dangerous. Pater's voice cut in then, calm as ever, as if stepping into a storm he had summoned himself. Lysa, enough. He moved across the room with practiced ease, careful not to make it look like he was rushing. His face was all softness, his tone patient, but Sansa saw the calculation in his eyes. He had let this moment come, pushed her to it maybe. She's done nothing wrong, he said gently. She's just a child. She's not, Lysa snapped. She's a woman, and you can't take your eyes off her. Her voice cracked on the last word, a pitiful breaking sound. Tell me you love me, she begged him suddenly. Tell me right now. Tell me you only want me. Pater placed his hands on her shoulders. Of course I love you, Lysa. Her eyes filled with tears. He leaned in closer. I have only ever loved one woman, he whispered. Sansa knew the words before he said them. She saw the shift in Lysa's face, from longing to pure horror. Your sister, he finished softly, and then he pushed her. It wasn't violent, not a shove, not even with force, just a gentle movement like brushing snow off a ledge. Lysa stumbled backward with a gasp, her mouth open in disbelief more than fear, and then she was gone, swallowed by the open sky. Sansa didn't move, didn't scream. She stood, frozen, staring at the place where Lysa had just been. Pater stepped back calmly and dusted his hands. She was unstable, he said simply. You saw it yourself. I did, Sansa said, quietly. She threatened you. She did. He turned to face her. Then we'll say she slipped, reached for you, lost her balance. Sansa didn't nod. She didn't need to. They both knew the truth. Another death, another fall, another secret shared between them. And now the Vale was his. A council was called the next day. Pater wept convincingly, claimed his grief, painted Lysa's death as a tragic accident brought on by the Moondoor's danger and her fragile state of mind. And Elaine Stone, quiet and wide-eyed, confirmed the tale with a trembling voice and a touch of rehearsed innocence. The lords of the Vale believed it, or chose to. But one of them, Lord Jan Royce, narrowed his eyes after the meeting. She's no bastard, he muttered to another. That's a high-born girl if I've ever seen one. Sansa heard it, filed it away. She had enemies, but she also had something she'd never had before. A stage. She was no longer hidden behind her father's name. She was a shadow now, yes, but a powerful one. Draped in mystery, wrapped in lies, and free to choose her next move. Pater thought she was his tool, his puppet, but Pater didn't see it yet. He had taught her too well. the girl who once begged for her life in King's Landing, was gone. The young woman now standing beside him was learning how to play kings like pieces on a board. And she had already removed her first. 1. The Vale was quiet after Lysa's fall. Snow dusted the high peaks like powdered glass, and the mountain winds whispered things no man could hear clearly. But below that cold silence, change stirred. Sansa, no, Elaine, moved like a ghost through the halls of the Eyrie, silent, watching, listening, not hiding, not anymore. She wanted them to see her now, wanted the lords and maesters to whisper about her when they thought she wasn't listening. Because every whisper was power. Lady Lysa's death was officially ruled an accident. Sansa had played her part perfectly. Eyes wide, voice shaking just enough. A stammered account of Lysa reaching out in grief and slipping through the moon door. It was believable, almost sweet. She even let herself cry in front of Robin Arryn once, just once, when he asked her what had happened to his mother. She was sad, Sansa said, brushing a tear away, and the wind was strong. That was all it took. Robin clung to her after that. He trusted her, adored her even, in his strange, sickly way. But not everyone was fooled. Jan Royce continued to press questions in the background, sharp-eyed and unsatisfied. He didn't accuse Pater directly, but Sansa noticed how he lingered after council meetings, how he studied her too long when she entered a room. "He's dangerous," she told Pater once, when they walked together on the snowy balcony above the high hall. Pater smiled like he was talking to a child. "He's proud. Men like him can't be bought, but they can be outplayed." Sansa turned her face toward the wind. "And what if he decides I'm the piece he wants off the board?" Pater stepped closer, his breath warm against her ear. "Then we remind him who moves the pieces." But Sansa wasn't afraid. Let Royce watch. Let him question. Because with each day, Sansa felt herself growing into something stronger. Not colder, exactly, but harder, sharper. And slowly, she was beginning to see the man beside her not just as a shield, but as a threat of his own. He thought she didn't see it. The way he looked at her. Possessive. Like she was a statue carved in the image of Catelyn Stark, but with softer edges. A daughter he could mold into something better. A prize he could someday claim. But Sansa did see it. She had seen it since the moment he kissed her in the snow, thinking she didn't understand the meaning beneath it. She understood everything. Now. And she had begun to twist that desire into something useful. She learned when to smile, when to linger, when to flatter, when to disappear into the background and let Peter speak for both of them, while she listened to the lords who truly ruled the Vale. She learned that men in armor respected titles, but they feared those who understood silence. Soon, she would give them a reason to do both. One evening, after the snow had thickened and the halls were silent, Pater summoned her privately. His face was serious, all charm stripped away. "There's a raven from King's Landing," he said. "Tommen sits the throne now. Cersei wants allies, and they've asked about you." Sansa's pulse stayed steady. "Do they know where I am?" "No, not yet." "And if they do?" "They'll demand you back. Try to force a marriage, claim you escaped justice." She nodded slowly, then looked him dead in the eyes. "Then I'll need to stop being Sansa Stark altogether." Pater blinked, just once. "What are you saying?" She stepped closer, calm and deliberate. "We rename me, reframe me. No longer a bastard, no longer a Stark. A new identity with ties to the Vale, one no Lannister can touch." He watched her, intrigued. "And what would you become?" Sansa let the silence stretch. Then she said, "A lady in my own right, Betrothed, perhaps, to Robin. With your help, of course. Pater's expression didn't change, but his eyes flared with something between pride and alarm. "You surprise me," he said. "No," she answered coldly. "You just underestimated me." Outside, the snow fell quietly, blanketing the mountains in stillness. But war was coming, and Sansa was ready to rise, not as a pawn, not as a Stark, but as a queen no one expected. Spring arrived in the Vale with no flowers, only wind. The mountains were still crowned with ice, but the paths below began to thaw, and word from the outside world began to filter in like cracks in stone. King's Landing stirred with rumors, whispers, of Sansa Stark's escape, of treason, of poisoned kings and vanished girls. Some believed she was in Dorne. Others said the Brotherhood without banners had taken her. The truth hid in plain sight, dressed in gray and soft-spoken lies, sitting quietly beside a weak boy lord no one took seriously. But those in the Vale were beginning to take notice. Sansa, Elaine, had become more than a shadow. She sat beside Robin during meetings, whispered advice into his ear, helped him write decrees with her own delicate hand. "She steadies him," one bannerman murmured. "She speaks like a noblewoman," said another. "She's dangerous," Lord Royce warned. And still, Peter watched with growing unease. It wasn't that she had power. He had given her power. Crafted her mask, shaped her image, opened doors for her. But now, she wasn't waiting for his approval. She was opening doors on her own. There was a moment he couldn't forget. It was late, well past midnight, and he'd been going over letters from Gulltown when he found Sansa in the Solar, alone. Standing by the fire with a cup of wine in hand, her red hair braided high in a northern style that hadn't been seen since the war began. She didn't flinch when he entered. "I sent ravens today," she said, still looking into the flames. "Where?" he asked, suddenly alert. "To the northern houses sworn to the Vale, those whose bloodlines tie to the First Men." His voice dropped. "Under what name?" She turned and met his eyes, calm, unblinking. "Sansa Stark." He stepped toward her. "Do you know what that means? You've signed your own death writ. If word reaches the Lannisters—" "Let them come," she interrupted, cold and clear. "Let them send another army to the mountains. The Vale has fought off worse." "You don't have that kind of power." "Not yet." Peter studied her, the girl he once saw as soft clay in. His hands had become something else, something steel beneath the skin. She was no longer grateful. She was no longer afraid. And worse, she no longer trusted him. "I've protected you," he said quietly. "You used me," she replied, sipping her wine. "You killed for me, lied for me. That doesn't make us allies. That makes us even." He stepped closer. "You think you understand the game now?" "I understand your game," she said, "and I'm not playing it anymore." The silence between them felt sharper than a blade. Then she added, "I've arranged something with Jon Royce." That caught his attention. "What have you done?" he asked, finally rattled. "Something that will make the Vale loyal to me, not to your lies." The next morning, the Lord's declarant arrived. Peter had expected some tension, some whispers, maybe a mild confrontation. He did not expect a formal hearing. They had come, with questions, with ledgers, with maps and sealed accounts of Lysa Arryn's death. They had come with accusations, none spoken aloud yet, but sharp in their presence. And Sansa stood before them, unveiled, calm, and regal. "I am Sansa Stark of Winterfell," she said, her voice carrying across the hall. "Daughter of Lord Eddard and Lady Catelyn. I was taken prisoner in King's Landing and held as a hostage. The man who sits beside me, Lord Baelish, rescued me. But he did not do it for love or honor. She let the silence settle. Let them listen. He used my name to gain power, and when his plans no longer needed my aunt, he threw her through the moon door. Royce stepped forward. "Can you swear to this, Lady Stark?" "I swear it," she said, "before the gods, old and new." Peter turned to her, shocked. His mouth opened to object, but Sansa raised her hand and the hall quieted. "You taught me how to lie, Lord Baelish," she said softly. "You just didn't teach me what happens when I stop." For a moment, no one moved. Then Royce spoke. "The Vale stands with Lady Sansa Stark, the rightful heir of Winterfell, and Peter Baelish, master of whispers, broker of chaos, realized he had created the one thing he could no longer control, a queen without a crown, a wolf that learned to wear a lamb's skin. The great hall of the Eyrie was silent as the lords. Of the Vale surrounded Peter Baelish, the same man who had once danced through the courts of Westeros like a shadow on fire, now stood cornered, betrayed not by enemies, but by the very girl he thought he had molded from nothing. Sansa Stark didn't tremble. She didn't avert her gaze. She stood tall in her mother's bones and her father's blood. Not the child who once dreamed of songs and lions, but a woman who had buried a king, watched an ant fall through the sky, and now held the fate of a kingdom in her hands. Peter's mouth curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. "You wouldn't be here without me," he said. "I gave you a future. I protected you." "No," she answered plainly. "You bought time with other people's blood, and you used my name like a key." He turned his eyes to the council, scrambling now, his charm flickering like a dying candle. "You believe her? A girl raised by wolves, shaped by Lannisters? She's as much a liar as I ever was." Royce stepped forward. "And yet her lies were for survival. Yours were for gain. You killed Lady Lysa, not in madness, but in calculation." "She was going to kill her," Peter barked, pointing toward Sansa. "I saved the girl." "Yes," Sansa said, "and then you poisoned her mind, just like you poisoned Joffrey's and poisoned the Vale with your secrets. You don't save people, Peter. You keep them indebted." He laughed suddenly. "And what will you do, Sansa? Have me thrown through the moon door too?" She tilted her head. "No," she said calmly. "I won't let you take the easy way out." And so they didn't. Peter Baelish was locked in the coldest cell of the Eyrie. No windows, no letters, no more whispers. Word of his fall spread quickly, carried by the same raven wings he once used to start wars. And Sansa? She stayed. She ruled, not with steel or fire, but with memory. She remembered what it was like to be voiceless, powerless. She remembered the silence after her father's execution, the ache of her mother's absence, the weight of her brother's death, the way it felt to smile through torment. And she used that memory as armor. Letters were sent under her seal, to the north, to the Riverlands, even to the Iron Islands. The lords of the Vale began to see her not just as the girl who had survived King's Landing, but as the woman who had risen from it stronger than any queen they'd bowed to before. When they asked if she would return to Winterfell, she only smiled. "Winterfell is not ready for me," she said. "Not yet." She stayed in the Eyrie for another year, shaping the Vale into a loyal stronghold. Robin Arryn remained lord in name, but it was Sansa who settled disputes. Sansa who met with envoys. Sansa who plotted every movement, every alliance, every whisper. One day, while walking the snowy paths overlooking the valley, Maester Coleman approached her. "You've changed everything," he said. She paused, brushing snow from a stone wall. "No," she replied. "I've just made sure they see me for what I always was." "And what is that, my lady?" She looked out over the endless, white-capped peaks. "Not a lady," she whispered. "Not a pawn, not a victim." She turned, her eyes like storm clouds above the trees. "I am the last daughter of House Stark, and I am the beginning of something new." Not long after, a raven came from the north. Jon Snow had taken Winterfell. Ramsay Bolton was dead. The banners had been raised once more, and the direwolf flew again over the walls. Sansa read the letter quietly, then folded it and tucked it into her cloak. Later that night, she stood alone in the same spot where Pater had once kissed her, in the snow. She remembered what he told her once. Every move is a step. Every player can be replaced. But he had been wrong. Some players change the game, and some burn the whole board. She looked toward the north. Winter is mine now. And with the first snow of a new winter falling over the Vale, Sansa Stark began her journey home, not as a frightened girl, but as a queen forged by poison, shadow, and fire. The girl who knelt at Joffrey's feet had died at the Purple Wedding. The woman who rose from his grave was just getting started.